thank you everybody for making the time. I really appreciate on a Wednesday evening to make the time and coming for a workshop or a webinar is not easy, I know. So I always appreciate that. Uh, I'm hoping you can all see my screen. We are going to look into scenario planning, basically, which is a part of your normal, budgeting or forecasting cycle, but use focus on the process element of it, and then basically Jens will talk to us much more about the technology element of it, leveraging BizView as a technology solution for it, where we will model out some basically scenarios and see how difficult or easy it is for people to do so. So it is about leverage showing that how we as finance function can focus on the strategic elements of basically scenario planning while we can leverage technology to do the operational uh, heavy lifting for us essentially. So let's dive right in. Basically, who is this webinar for? Ideally, for all the finance people who are involved in the planning cycles, decision makers, managers, FP&A professionals for sure. Because as a FP&A professional, your life revolves around budgeting, forecasting, and reporting. So definitely that, and finance leaders looking for better risk management because we live in a highly unstable world at the minute, right? So the planning different scenarios like COVID, your currently wars going on across the world. How does that impact your supply chain or your raw materials and things like that? All of that is a part of your risk management profile, while looking at how you improve your planning process overall as well, because technology definitely helps you improve your planning process. Okay, what is the agenda today? A very short and slick agenda. Quick round of introduction of who we are, basically, uh, and then and then basically we'll go into what is scenario planning, why do we need to even talk about scenario planning, components of a scenario planning, and then what is the process fundamentals around a scenario planning process. And then hopefully I'll cover that in 15 odd minutes, and then we'll give it on to Jens for him to show us a demo of the product essentially. So that's the agenda. Let's kick off. So this is me. I think a lot of you have seen me, have attended my webinars before, so you know. I am Tejas Parikh. I am a MBA, a SEMA qualified professional consultant with Anaplan certification, Power BI certification, and a geologist, and now a VENA certified modeler as well. So yeah, I mean, I love what I do, and I love getting some more certifications around it. But well qualified is what I'd like to think. As a individual, this is my experience, worked with some big names in like Nielsen, GL Care, Vodafone, done COE delivery project, budget implementation, dashboard implementation, analytical tools implementation, and such like. So this has been my career even as a professional, where I've been in fully in industry, and then as a business, as a Akshar Business Consulting, we've been delivering to like Vidbread, which is the owners of Premier Inn, Unilever, Dixon, Cinemedia, now Xerox. They signed up actually two more clients. I need to put their logos up there. So yeah, constantly if you see there's a theme there: budgeting process. Xerox is an plan implementation. Again, Power BI implementation. So we specialize around BI and CPM implementation for businesses to be able to leverage technology to, for finance to be able to do a better job uh, in terms of more strategic focus rather than operational Excel book focus is what we as Akshar Business Consulting do. And that is what we call. So why scenario planning? Scenario planning is basically a strategic management tool. It essentially helps us for potential future outcomes and cover for uncertainties. Uh, Anticipating change, risk mitigate, anticipating change, strategic agility, and competitive advantage is what you get if you do a good scenario plan. It helps you make informed decision making and innovation because you are prepared for the scenario before you've got there. At the same time, it is also a risk mitigation. So, what is your exposure in supply chain? What is your exposure in basically manufacturing? What are your, key people, key processes, key inputs, things like that. And therefore, it's a long-term thinking as well as a medium-term strategic advantage if you do it correctly, essentially. Uh, What are the components of scenario planning? Key components are obviously data collection, then analyzing the data, engage with stakeholders to understand basically what are the possible diverse scenarios they would like to think about, look at, things like that, develop those scenarios, and then assess the risk, assess what are the plans you could make as a business if those scenarios are to basically actually happen or materialize. The key thing which I would like to just point out here is I have obviously been involved in a lot of scenario planning myself, but what I find is businesses tend to focus scenario planning a lot more on internal focus in terms of what if sales grows 5% or sales drops 5% or things like that. Whereas there should definitely, if last few years have taught us something, is there should be an element of external focus as well in terms of what will happen if there's a policy change, what will happen if economic growth slows down, what will happen if bank base rates go up. All those kind of scenarios as well is stuff that we should definitely be planning for. If we don't, then we are really leaving risk on the table, which we may not want to. Okay. Uh, does that kind of make sense? Does that resonate with people what you have done in practice for people before I move on? Because I like some engagement. So, guys, anybody? Any experience with scenario planning? What are the metrics you would have used in your scenario planning generally? No? Everybody's tired today, it seems. Okay. From a role perspective, there is a technology can play an important role. It cannot obviously do the human element of it, but for example, yes, data collection, data processing, data cleansing is something which technology can definitely help you with. It helps you with collaboration as well because you can collect inputs from different people essentially, and helps people collaborate in that perspective, which is, I think, a very important part because then people can actually provide inputs independently. Scenario modeling, obviously, which is what Jens is going to talk to us about today. Scenario monitoring, because again, as your actual start coming through, you can start looking at monitoring what scenarios you had built up, and are any of them materializing? Are you at any risk of any of them coming through? And then visualizing your data as well to see that where is my risk. And then obviously it helps in decision support as well because you can then build dashboards around it, reporting mechanisms around it, which means it helps decision support as it goes along as well, which also is a part of your risk mitigation, right? Because the earlier you can spot the trend, the better you can mitigate that risk, or better you can manage the scenario which is materializing. Does that kind of thumbs up, down? No? Okay. From a process standpoint, basically, the steps to follow, which at least we recommend as ABCL, we recommend to our clients, and the value we bring to this conversation always is to leverage tools like BizView, right? To ensure that as a client, as a business, you are maximum utilizing the tool to the maximum, right? You are using it not as a shiny new toy, but exactly in real world scenario of this is my real world business problem and how do I better manage this scenario. And the steps to go around it is, define a scope basically in terms of what is the core problems that you want to analyze? What do you want to, make a checklist of what are the items that you want to make sure internal and external that you want to put forth for consideration. Then get a 360 feedback across the business of what is this framework enough? Are you covering everything? Is there any risk that you need to think about? Impact and uncertainty, discuss the variability. For example, what if sales drop 50%? So what is the range you want to work with? Sales drop 5% to 15%, or sales drop, I don't know, 40% to 60%. So make sure you get some kind of grids around that one to get an understanding of what do you want to cover. Okay. Then it's about scenario matrix in terms of what is the likelihood of happening and what is the risk that entails with it, to then actually have which are the ones that you really need to have an alternative strategy for, and which scenarios are ones which you can actually not worry much about. Okay. And then define the strategy to make sure that you've looked at the high probability, high risk items, and you had a mitigation strategy around it, have got a whole manual around it to make action plan around the same. And then it is about monitoring of which are of these are materializing and which of this is coming across, right? But again, all of this scenario building can be done in a tool like BizView. So can basically monitoring can be done by in a tool like BizView, and that's important, right? Because you need to leverage technology where possible so that you can focus much more time on the strategic element of identifying the scope, you know, making an action plan around it and things like that. So that is why monitoring the right elements is critical. What are the best practices around it? I think inclusivity is one which I have always found finance to be lacking on, in my experience. We need to talk to genuinely just enough people, include them into the process of scenario modeling, because there are risks which we tend to overlook just because we make assumptions that it should be fine. So, like, especially in raw material, in the case of raw material, in case of supply routes, I remember, I think it's it was summer this year or last year, I don't remember, but a boat got stuck in the English Channel, and because of which the whole supply chain got chock-a-block for 3 months, right? And now that's a scenario which you would never imagine as a finance professional. But if you had talked to a logistics person, they would say, yeah, this is a risk which you would have to look into. So there is an element of talking to your colleagues as much as possible. Regular communication, data structures are important. Again, that is the reason why this session today is including technology in the conversation, because leveraging technology, the more robust the data structure we have, the better it is easier it is for you to manage risk and manage the business. And then qualitative as well as quantitative analysis in terms of yes, you want to look at what are the numbers and what is the financial impact of it, but also at the same time, stress on the resources, employee morale, things like that. There are qualitative elements as well. Employee skill set, readiness, people's availability. Like when I did my projects with Dixon's Carphone, there it was about uh, making sure that essentially we have the right skilled people during especially Christmas time, right? This is the time. This is the time when they get so busy. They do like almost 30-40% of their annual sales in this, like, 1.5, 2 months. So it is about making sure that you're managing the qualitative risk of the right skilled people around at the right time of the year as well. So those are elements in terms of best practices. Common data, common challenges. I think the fact that everybody is here itself already talks about the fact that did you appreciate the fact that data is important. So data challenges are something which most finance professionals face quite regularly. So that is something I'd say is critical. Uh, Overcomplication, again, as finance, we sometimes tend to overthink things which we need to try and avoid. Sometimes it is just simple. There is a problem and we need to just work with it. Okay. There is definite resistance to change. So every time we have gone and implemented technology in any business, we always found that, yeah, but Excel can do it. Yes, but what if your Excel crashes? Today the world is moving towards cloud solutioning, and that is the way to look at things. So the resistance to change and job insecurities are basically a commonplace when you're trying to implement this kind of technology and these kind of advanced forecasting tools. Resource constraints in terms of every risk that you identify and every scenario that you build for, you may not be in the position to mitigate it. And that is also fine. It is about then recognizing it, documenting it, and being aware of it. Because sometimes the resource required for it to mitigate it might just not be realistic. Okay. And then uncertainty and ambiguity, because ultimately every scenario that you are making has got a level of assumptions around it, right? It comes from people's experience. It comes from their what people have seen around and things like that. So there is an inherent element of ambiguity and uncertainty around it. But that is the reason why monitoring is an important part of a good scenario plan. So I have seen again scenario plans where people have made a scenario, put it in the board presentation for the budget sign off. Okay. And then what about actually, monitoring it? Has any of it materialized? There is no action around it. That is really, really not to be done, is all I can say, right? Be aware. If you make a scenario, put in best practices around it to monitor it as well. Then you can better manage uncertainty and risk around it. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Jens. But before I just do that, does anybody have any questions? Because today I am going to only talk this much. I'm done. Anybody? Any questions? Anything? Any comments? Any experience you want to share? Thank you, Hector, for your kind comments, mate. Much appreciated. Anybody? No?
But come more questions when we show the
tool, maybe, yeah.
The tool, yeah. But please don't hesitate to ask. Yes. I need to breathe as well. So Tejas doesn't breathe, but I need to breathe.
I do breathe. Yeah, we can share slides, Hector, after definitely. Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hector, Jens, you want to share your screen?
Yeah. I have to excuse my voice a little bit, but it's I'm in the northern part of Sweden, so my winter has definitely started, and I'm having a little bit of a cold. You should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct? Anyone confirm? Tejas?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jens.
And you can keep an eye on the chat, if you will, also for me.
I will do that.
Introduce myself really quick. My name is Jens Karlsson. I'm with Insight Software, the vendor for Bisio, the solution we're going to look at how to do this scenario planning. I have a few slides. I will definitely get into the tool and to the demo, so don't go away. I just have 2 or 3 slides before we get in there. With me, there's Gustav Lundin also in the audience here. He is a consultant, long-term professional services supplier for Bisio as well. So if you have really tricky questions, I might ask him also to help me. But both of us have been working. I've been working with Bisio for 20 years, and Gustav for about 10 years now. Okay, so Bisio, streamlined your budgeting and reporting process with connected data. That's just the tagline for Bisio, the planning software. And I will go into detail, of course, what Bisio is. Now, just a quick story. Bisio is a Scandinavian software, started in 2001, and we grew and expanded globally. And then 2019, we got acquired by Insight Software. And now it's the flagship planning solution from Insight Software. And one job that I do and part of my role is actually acquiring and teaming up with new partners like Action Consulting. So this is why we're here today doing this webinar as well. All right, let's see if my page down would work here. There we go. Before we talk about the product itself, I just want to lift the view a little bit on the why we do planning in a tool like software, in an automated way, in a software that supports the business. Tejas mentioned a lot of these things, and of course, we're going to focus on the modeling in the scenario today. But automation is a big part of moving away from a manual process. A lot of customers are stuck in Excel today, and we want to get away from that. We want to change the key numbers that drives our business, both on the revenue side and cost side, and that's how we want to measure our business, or actually plan our business, and then of course measure with the follow-up. Modeling is of key, of course, to that process, where you can then work in different scenarios, in parallel scenarios. You can call them versions or scenarios or what-if analysis. Doesn't really matter. And for the sake of Bisio, it's simply called a version ID, and that's what I'm going to also show to you today, how we set that up. But having that capability of just copy data, set up a new scenario, change the numbers individually, and follow up is the key here, and what Tejas was talking about. Control is a huge thing about getting this whole collaborative process into a company-wide exercise where you have control of the entire process, but you can also see the detail that we're meeting deadlines and follow the process accordingly. And of course, actually, I'm going to do a lot of the demo from a workflow, which you will see it's actually a central part of Visio. But that also shows you then in the demo how we do this with collaboration and accountability. So the user, of course, will have the user focus, but the control comes from the whole organization doing the same thing in different scenarios. And then agility, again, was mentioned before with the pandemic, and now we have a war in Ukraine. You know, things happen, and we need to act quickly. And to summarize this slide, I would say, don't just punch numbers, make planning strategic. That's the whole point, right? Spend your time doing valuable things. Okay, Visio, features and capabilities. So planning on the top left there is, of course, the core of Visio. That's why we started back in 20-some years ago. It was actually an Excel plugin. You will see this when we get into the demo because it's extremely spreadsheet-like. In fact, we can support 98% of any Excel function or modeling or sheet that you're using today. We can set that up in Visio, so you will have the input models that you need and the calculations that you need because we support them out of the box. Of course, it needs to be connected with data and the dimensions and all of that, but that's where the integration, of course, comes in to your source systems, whatever they are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. In addition, of course, we have all the follow-up capabilities that Tejas was mentioning with the reporting, also spreadsheet-like, the analytics and dashboard. I'm actually going to show you both today just to validate and compare those scenarios that we will play around with a little bit today. And then on the bottom left there, the workflow, which is just controlling the whole process. But it's a really nice, it's actually the holy grail for most of our customers, independent on how big they are or how complex they are. They use the workflow to control those processes. So if we look on the right, Visio is a cloud solution, pure cloud. It's a single tenant though, so every customer actually controls their own upgrades, which is kind of a plus being hosted, but you can also decide. Easy to integrate, so whatever the ERP you may have, I'm 100% sure we have integrated with it before. We have plugin connectors for a lot of the big ones, and of course the most common ones, also smaller ones, Microsoft Stack, Xero, Sage, you name them, we have worked with them before. And of course also flat files and getting data out of other sources using those types of things. Collaboration, we talked about that, the workflow, I'm not going to spend time on that today. Scalable and simplified because we can integrate and work with any dimension and hierarchy that you may have or that business have, or even different entities within the business. We just use those mappings and we plan on them, we report against the actuals on them, meaning that we can plan anything. And I have a honeycomb slide at the end here that will just show you that Visio really supports any type of planning. So I like the second bullet there, take planning beyond finance, because you want to build the granularity where it makes most sense for your forecasting or your budgeting and forecasting, and have those things drive the numbers, right? And then the last one there, flexibility to meet your needs. That's really the spreadsheet technology. As I mentioned, any dimensions and time horizons, we'll look at that really quick in the demo as well. And then certainly, of course, with the different version scenarios and what if analysis. So any questions so far there? All right. So this is my last slide before we get into the demo with the business Visio use cases and going back to that scalability. Again, if you can plan something or enter a model in a spreadsheet, Visio can do it. So that's how easy, I mean, not how easy it is, but that's what I'm trying to say. It's spreadsheet built, but it's cloud and it's a .NET framework. We just built in the spreadsheet functionalities. We support anything that you can do in a spreadsheet, which means that we can support all these different types of planning: revenue planning, OpEx, cost of goods sold, HR, of course, project, workforce utilization, sales and demand forecasting, CapEx for sure, balance sheet and cash flow. And then, of course, balance sheet and cash flow, sometimes it's just reporting, but a lot of customers wants to actually adjust and what do you call them? Adjustment of actuals and other numbers before you do the cash flow as well. But anything is really possible in that sense. And of course, as far as methodologies, we can do driver based. I'm going to maybe, if I have time, show you this today. Bottom up, which is the most common one, of course, top down, and then hybrid, a mix of those as well. Zero based should be there as well. Of course, we can do zero based, but normally you want to initialize the budget from some kind of values or help values and or previous versions. So usually we don't see zero based a lot. Any questions there? All right. Let's get into the solution. And if I can find my window, I have two windows open because I'm going to switch between two different users here in a second. And what time do we have? 30 minutes. That's perfect. And plus some questions at the end there. So I will try to be within 20 or 25 minutes here. All right. So I'm logged on as the administrator just so that I can show you everything. But one thing that the slide talked about was the ownership that you can have with Visio in your organization, meaning that our customers testify to not being too dependent on their internal IT, but not their provider or Insight Software or Action Consulting or anyone. They can actually take ownership of the solution. And the things I'm going to do today, as far as copy version, set up the workflow, that is just part of the admin user role. So you never really need to call IT or even support anyone to set these things up. You can drive the process forward yourself as finance people. The same UI is, of course, for everybody. It's cloud hosted. It's one URL for everybody, but of course different depending on who you are and what login you're using, and of course the setup for that particular user. Before we move on, I just want to say that, of course, the users are, they are named users. You all know what that means, but it also means that for every individual, you can group them into roles, organizational belonging. So the rendering of the whole solution will be completely different depending on who you are. And you can also limit then the access down to entity, business unit, account group, projects, whatever dimensions you're working with, whatever dimensions, customers, contracts, products, whatever. You can limit users all the way down to the level that they need or should work with. And of course, that also then render the application differently depending who you are, which I will show you now in a second user login here in a second. But I'm the admin, meaning that I can do everything. So if you look on the left here, you have the workflow, dashboard, analytics, which is kind of the follow-up type UI or modules, if you want to call it that. Reporting, which is that spreadsheet-like report. So again, any calculations, any type of reporting that you want to do, you can do. I will show you. And then the input, which is the focus, of course, of Visio. That's why we started 22 years ago, and that's still the focus. And we call ourselves a planning solution. But with any planning solution, there is follow-up. Hence, we have those capabilities. The rest of the modules here is that admin and ownership type modules. So a lot of different settings. You can brand the applications, user access, as I talked about, system settings, which is including the currencies and some of the versioning and things that you can do back end to support the users. Client data is actually where you work with the chart of accounts or the different dimensional hierarchies. I will actually go into that in a second. And then jobs. This is a fantastic feature where you can actually lift part of any integration. So any integration that we have feeding Visio from a source system, actuals and dimensions and whatever, we can then lift to an end user so they can trigger the load and again delta load of that part of the integration themselves. So they can just kickstart it here or schedule it later or do whatever they need. They don't have to call IT. They don't have to ask someone to refresh. They don't have to wait overnight. Users can do this. All right. Any questions so far? So that's really just the quick overview of the modules sort of in Visio. All of this comes with Visio, so everybody purchasing Visio has the same solution. It's just a matter of what you kind of publish to the end user and the content that you want to have your end user start working with. Yeah, question? Sounds like there's a question.
Jens,
Yes.
how much training do you provide at the start?
So, well, first of all, there is an implementation of Visio, so we will have a scoping call and a workshop with you and to understand the needs you have, and then fill Visio up, of course, with your, of course, the integrations and the data, but also the content. So what you see today is the standard things that almost all users, organizations use. But as I mentioned several times already, it will be what you need it to be and using your Excel models, etc. So that's actually part of your answer, my answer to you, because then at the end, when we go live with this solution for your organization, users will understand. They see the same spreadsheets that they've been working with before. It's not a lot of hocus pocus, if you know what I mean. But we try to train the trainer during the implementation, meaning that the key stakeholders in the implementation actually learn enough that they can then learn their internal users. But of course, we can also schedule half a day or 2 days or whatever for the end users themselves. Now, if you ask about the tool itself, like learning how to set everything up and integrate data and doing all of those things, there is an online e-learning course for that. And I don't know how much time it takes, but I'm sure you need to spend a few days because there's actually, I don't know, 40, 50 videos in there. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So to look at it differently, sorry to interrupt Jens, but Bijal, to look at it differently, there is a user training and there's a modeler training. So the user training is about a part of user acceptance training of how do I go in the tool and add new cost centers, add new GL accounts, for example. How do I create a forecast? How do I create scenario? Though that is a part of the user training, which will be a part of your implementation, and any good BizView partner, including us, when we are doing that implementation, that we will train. Okay. And then what he's talking about, the 40, 50 videos online, is about building this model from scratch. Like I started, right? I'm an Anaplan modeler or I'm a Venna modeler. Then it's like you are looking to move purely into the technology side and going and implementing BizView in other places. That is a much longer and a much different kind of a study course. So in terms of answering your question, the user training is generally ongoing as a part of the implementation and can be a couple of days at the end of it as well. So you have some documentation around how to use the tool. But the other one that Jens was referring to is much more around becoming a modeler focused on BizView, which I don't think many clients are looking to become. So that's different.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Tejas.
And there's
no worries, Bijal.
And there's also a separate admin part of that. So a lot of the things that I'm doing today in the admin modules here is actually also a separate section of that e-learning, which is quite easy to, I mean, nothing is really hard to learn here, but it's a lot of content. So that's why there's 40 or 50 chapters in that e-learning. All right, should we go on? So before we get into the whole scenario planning, you will see the effects of, or the capabilities of it right here, but I just want to open a few things so you get the idea of what Visio really is all about. And then we go through a step-by-step process of how to set up a new version or scenario, how to add it to the workflow, how the user will see it, and then on the follow-up with the report, analytics, and dashboard. So all of those things we will do a step-by-step sort of a little bit later here. But just to show you how a typical solution may look for the end users, let me just open a few things here. So I told you a lot of the demo would be done from the workflow. So any workflow that the admins, in that case, in the central organization, has actually published to the organization will, of course, reflect that organization. So this demo, we have United K and Germany. We have different cost centers under each, of course, and then different content or nodes of things that needs to be done. So this is the automatic status control. You have the coloring, you have everything that you need to control the process from the workflow. And again, this is quite simple one, but under UK, for example, centrally, you may have some sales forecasting exercise that's then allocated to the cost center. You have an IT cost center department that does their budget, and then you allocate it to the cost centers. You may have some reporting, of course, and then at the nodes or the cost centers, it then repeats. So you have the employee budget, you have the P&L project, maybe you have result budget, you have a P&L report, and then it repeats and repeats and repeats. So the same content, i.e. in Visio we call them templates, is actually everywhere. And that's what I mean with being Visio supports different chart of accounts, different currencies, different even sources, meaning that it's one template, but it's used globally, no matter what the entities are actually kind of doing. If they're planning the same thing and doing the same type of input, we can use the same template. Okay, so let's look at one of these notes and a typical result budget. And this is where we start to see now, or I'm going to use as an example for the scenario planning as well. We are under budget process B. Remembering the workflow, we have 3 scenarios open, B1, B2, B3. We're under B1 currently, and then result budget. For that node, and again, I'm the admin, right? We have the deadlines, and as you will see really quickly here, the demo date is actually a couple of years old, but I'm sure you're not unused to that, seeing demos. The version, by the way, is very new, so it's one of the latest versions of Visio, but the data is a little bit old. For any node, you can chat, you can have the automatic status control, you have instructions, including images and step-by-step descriptions, and you can attach documents. So really, that's why I say that workflow is the holy grail of any organization, independent of how complicated or deep the structures of the organizations are. Okay, so before I get on with the scenario type specifics, I just want to switch browser. So now I'm Emily Sampson. You can see I'm logged on here with another user. She does not have those admin modules, so she can't see those, obviously. She's not one of the admins, she's one of the end users. When she looks at her workflow, she has the same scenarios open, but she only sees the part of the tree that she needs to focus on, i.e. London, and the result budget and the P&L report, which they want her to validate or verify. So that's what we mean in the PowerPoint with collaboration. The whole organization, doesn't matter how big or complicated, and still with user focus, right? So now when Emily starts to working on this, she can of course chat and say, I'm going to start right now. She can open the budget input and start working with this. And of course, now the whole template renders differently depending on who you are. So she was in London. We can see it up here, London headquarters. She's in version B1, of course, according to that workflow step she was opening. And we render the accounts that are active for London. We bring in actuals or any other help value for her, and then she can enter her budget or forecast going forward in, I call it actually the white space. It doesn't have to be white, just like in Excel. It could be yellow or green or orange, but this is where she needs to input stuff. And the great part here now is, of course, compared to an Excel, is that nobody can break the formulas, but they will understand them. So if I look at the formula bar for any sum or if or whatever, users will understand what's going on. They can use formulas to enter, the help value times 20%, do things like that. And, it's like working in a spreadsheet, but they can't break it. Any additional dimensional values like we're using on the rows here, we can then have something called insert row. So users can insert dimensional values that's flowing from the ERP that has not been used, but of course they showed up in the ERP. We refreshed the integration, so now she can start using them if she wants to. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time here. I know we're limited in time here, so let me move on a little bit. Just a few things. The help values are always integrated on the lowest possible detail, so usually transactional level, meaning that Emily then can see all the transactional details for her help values, including scanned invoicing if that's what you or the customer supports that. At the end of the day, it's all about giving Emily the best possible, how do you say, help or support to enter a good budget and forecast going forward. So with the totals and the spread keys, and this is also ownership, I mean, you will edit and work with your spreadsheets yourself. And we can build them off of different trends, of course, and help values. So let's say she's happy with this. The only value I don't like is maybe June, so I'm going to lower that. And remember, we're in scenario B1, right? So I'm now going to comment that one. All the contractors are gone or on vacation. Maybe we're in Sweden, right? So June, all the people are on vacation. We now have a comment on that transaction. In the same image here, you can see that we can mix long year terms as well as the detail. You can actually plan date, week, quarter, month, and year. Doesn't matter. And the last thing I want to mention here is that we also have generic comments which are available in reports as well, where, and this is really smart, you can add documents and you can have a chat thread around a single comment. So now if we pause that for 1 second, you can see that we are now in London workflow version B1. We're in the year, well, 2021 here in this case, but you know, the data is a little bit old. This is what we do now, and this is what we store here. So when she says press values, because she came from the workflow, you get this question, are you ready for approval, yes or no? Let's say she says yes, it changes to blue. And of course, on the other side, the responsible gets a notification, something happened here. He sees that it's blue, it can be an automatic email trigger, and hopefully then he approves that budget for her, and then she can see that instantly. So, okay, fine, I'm done. Thank you very much. So that's how we talk about collaboration with user perspective. Does that make sense to everybody? Just a nod or a thumbs up would be, yeah, thank you. Okay, now scenario planning. And there's a lot of things, and ask me questions, please, because of course, and I don't have time to go through that, but in that result budget, you saw that the revenue part could be then, of course, driven by a sales forecast on volume. The IT account in the result budget for London could be something that's done centrally and then allocated. You have the HR, which is done by some assumptions on the UK level, and then by the employee budget, which is the salaries, and then you have values on the P&L that Emily was looking at, right? So everything can be split up in a step-by-step process depending on the input needed, and that's what I mean with granularity. If we have some moments at the end there, I will show you that really quick as well. Okay, so scenario planning. What do we do now if we want to? I mean, we have 3 open scenarios here. And of course, if I go in here in scenario B2 and change the number, that's going to be another value separated by that version ID. So how do we accomplish this? And this goes back to the ownership now that I wanted to show you today. So as an admin, of course, I need to be the admin then. Sorry, going back to this window. Under client data, we have something called, it's called other, but here we have the planning versions. So essentially, you can create as many planning versions as you want. And again, I'm calling it versions because that's the name in Visio database. But you can call them scenarios. You can call them what if 1, what if 2, what if 3, if you want to. At the end of the day, it's an version ID. So we can add a new one. Let's call it maybe budget version 4 then, right? So B4 budget version 4, and I also need to tie it to a year, or what year should it be valid? So 2021, like the others. Okay, let's save. Now that's an empty version. Where did it go? Did I not press save? Sorry. B4 budget version 4 2021, and then save. Oh, it's under, sorry. I need to inactivate it. Active, there we go. Okay, so now we have that new version. but it's empty. So now I go to copy data, and this is a really, really nice utility where from any existing version, all the versions that we have, to any version that we have set up, we can now copy values, initialize. So also from actuals. So we're going to use let's use budget version 1 as the from version and budget version 4 as the 2 version. We do not want to move the cell comments, so we turn that off. In this one, you can actually move the data also in periods, but let's just keep the same so we can set it up as a parallel workflow. So we're going to start the copy, and yes, and hopefully this turns green. Yep, there we go. So now we have the new version. We have copied or initialized it with something, i.e. the budget version 1 values. Now we go to the workflow, and again, I am the admin, right? So this button as a design mode, normal users do not have. Emily does not have that, but I have that as the designer here. So we can now go into the design mode. And well, there's a lot of old demo versions here, but these are the ones that you saw in the demo. Base workflow B2, base workflow B3. So let's open one of these and do save as. When I do save as, everything will be the same, including, we look in London result budget, including the doer and responsible IDs of who is actually responsible for this step. I mean, we want everything to stay the same, right? That's what we want. So we do save as. We call it, I guess, base workflow 4. And we call it budget process B4. Link per work, yes, we can do that, and then save. So now we have the workflow 4. Now the only thing we need to do, because we did save as, you see that this workflow works on budget version B1. And again, I'm saying version here, but you can be called scenario or scenario version 1. We want to tie it or connect it to the B4 that we just did, right? That's the only difference we want to have right now. So let's do save, and then we do publish. Yes. So now if we look on the workflow, we should have well, okay, I named it differently, so it didn't rank in the same order as I wanted, but you get the idea. This is the new one, budget B4, and the tree, everything is the same. Of course, it does not move the statuses and everything because they are now, we're starting from scratch in this scenario, right? That makes sense. So everybody needs to kind of start all over again or complete their steps as required. If we look from the Emily side of things, in this browser, she also have that new workflow instantly and can start working from that workflow instantly. And hopefully now when I open this, we have some values also because we did initialize this from the budget version 1 values. These are version 4 values, but they're initialized or copied from version 1. So let me pause right there for a second. Any questions, anything that you understand or don't understand or see? Can you see the ownership? I mean, imagine doing this as finance people centrally, just copy versions, set it up, publish the new workflow, ask everybody to start the process in a parallel version. And then I'm going to show you now the last few minutes, of course, the follow up and how we can analyze all this. We're good? Okay. So let's change in version B4 now. Let's change something ridiculously much just so we see the graphs and everything pop up here. So let's change this to 3 times or 400% of the previous actuals here, times 4 or 400%, but 4, right? That's the Excel. So 164. And you can see with the spread keys, of course, every monthly value will be, spread out according to the spread key. Okay, let's save this. And in B4, are you ready for approval? Sure. Yes, we know the drill. Blue at the other side, the admin can then see that something has happened here, and hopefully we then approve this. Okay, so now we have 4 different scenarios running. How do we compare these? Well, one is within the version. We, of course, have the different reporting. So the P&L of the London cost center, we have the actuals, and we're actually in June, right? And we have the accumulated for the year, and we have last year. So this is just the layout of this particular report. But what we do here is we have the latest values that Emily entered, and you can see the high value for the budget compared to the actuals. Again, I increased it with 400%, which maybe doesn't make sense, but I just want to prove the point to you. And then using regular spreadsheet functionality, we can compare, we can look at deviances, we can look at everything using spreadsheet functionality. We can even show you with conditional formatting. We can show the users that you're crazy, you're way out of line here. Rethink this, please. So again, going back to that slide with targets and KPIs and everything, if we have the values or if someone has entered it somewhere, we can compare it in input models, we can use them in input models, and we can use them in reports to compare and highlight for the end user.
Can you compare 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, good question. So I don't have that in the workflow actually, but as a report,
sorry, before you go ahead. Sorry, one second. Before you go, Bhavin, the fact is also that this also connects to Power BI. You attended my previous Power BI stuff, right? So you could do that in Power BI, as well as what Jens is about to show you is you could do it in BizView itself as well.
Yeah, a lot of customers take the planning data, all the versions, all the scenarios, the data that has been collected on the forecasts or budgets, and then we expose that using a REST API so that any external system, not only Power BI, but any external system can actually query our API to get that data. Okay, so this is just a report where we're still in the same period. We select, there's actually 3 columns here, A, B, and C, and we can just select, what do I want to see? I want to see budget version 1, 2, and then this new one that we just did, B4. We're in London, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to open that. And again, this is a spreadsheet so you can have, tons of calculation columns or do whatever you want, but it renders according to London where we are. Again, same as the dynamic for the input model. We bring in the actuals, we bring in B1, B2, and B4. And you can see the difference there again with the high value for her ridiculous 400% increase in revenue. But again, and at the same time, you always have the drill down to the budget transactions and the actual transaction, including that cell comment that she did. So, if you see my hands, it's all with the data and the combination of dimensions. That's where the data resides. So it's aggregated from that and automatically aggregated, and it's broken down using those. Okay, I know we're out of time here almost, so I just want to open a few more things. Dashboarding is a fantastic, and by the way, an included part of any end user. Anyone that has an input capability has the workflow, has the dashboarding, has the analytics, has the reporting, and as well as the input. So all of those, we call it power user. They have all the capabilities that I'm showing you as far as the end user perspective here. So the dashboarding, we have a financial, in the demo, we have a financial planning dashboard with those versions. And again, now I'm the admin, so if Emily would see it, she would of course only see London here, but let's click London so we see. And again, what happened here? Boom. Oh, B4. I guess we have to go back into B4 and readjust the revenues because they look ridiculous. Instant verification or notification that, something is off here. The trend is off. It's just different graphs of the same thing, really. The revenues per version, but you can compare them really, really quick by either filtering or highlighting or looking at them differently. It's just, data presented and filtered. And then the last thing, I guess we're almost out of time here, is in the analytical, which is, I should say, which one am I looking for here now? Is it this one? Budget report version comparison. Basically, this is a pivot style report using the data that was just saved seconds ago by Emily and all the others, filtered by whatever, and then we have the versions again. I mean, I prepared this for this demo, of course, but we have the version, and we can see again, there's something not right here, or maybe it is right, but at least we see that it's the version B4 that sticks out, because if I remove that version and only select the other three, they're going to be more equal, right? So just the pivot style table with all the capabilities to expand, collapse. If I add, I don't know what I should add here now, maybe, what is this? Revenue. Maybe I can add, what do we have here? Yeah, I don't have a lot of things here. Oh,
client, or
time.
volume.
Okay. Yeah, we can add the, yeah, or for sure measures, but let's add the account, well, let's do this. Client, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, client
I'm not
ID
sure
or
about the
client name.
data. I'm not sure about the data here, actually, Tejas.
Okay.
Probably gonna, UK revenues. Yeah, see, it doesn't happen, and we don't have anything. But anyway, you can drag and drop all the domain. I can use another one. Let's use the sales one. It's really cool. Sales by product line. It's a little bit more advanced. We have all the different categories, and we will have the whole product structure actually. And now I can add customer at the top above that. So it's then going to add another layer on the top here. And again, if you're Emily, who has only access to or responsibility for customer FOG Henrik, guess what? She would only see these rows. That's it. I mean, it renders and it's dynamic according to who you are and the authorization you have been provided with. But the graphs, what I wanted to show is that the graphs collapse and react to the expanding and collapsing of what the user is actually doing. All right.
I think we are out of time. So anybody,
That's,
any questions?
yes.
A lot of questions came in the chat, which I think Gustav.
So let's look.
And no, really Gustav quick. And I have answered a lot of them. So they are all covered.
Okay, good.
So we are all good.
Okay, good. Good.
Anybody for any more?
All good.
Can I steal the screen back, Jens? Do you mind? Can I steal the screen back?
The product?
No. Can I share?
Oh, you share. Sorry, of course.
Yep.
Here we go.
There we go. So we just went through the whole demo. Thank you, Jens, for taking the time. I apologize. We have run over a little bit. But obviously we've gone through a lot of questions. So thank you for all your questions so far. This is where you can get in touch. Please do get in touch if you have any more questions. I'm sure Jens, Gustav, and myself, in between three of us, we can definitely field all of them. And we will be sharing a recording of this next week after tidying it up a little bit. So we can do that as well. I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes before we shut the call. So I think Beagle is asking a question. Go right ahead. Anybody else? Any questions? Hector, Simon, Mike, Caroline? No. Is this works with NetSuite and SAP? Does it work with NetSuite and SAP?
Yeah, it does. And with SAP, we have a little bit of a, how do you say, access. I mean, they have, I'm not the technical, maybe Gustav knows more, but usually there's a reader license to even read the data that's super expensive. So in all reality with SAP customers, at least the on-prem customers, we actually end up using flat file exports because the customer doesn't want to invest in that read license. To get the data.
Okay, that makes sense.
No, that we have had one recent project where they're investigating using another tool from Insight Software. I know there are
That's
two
true.
specific SAP export tools that are
Yes.
SAP's version agnostic.
Mhm.
They are created for different purposes, but we are experimenting with using those for direct integration with SAP, and
Yeah.
also a
Cool.
platform data sharing project from Insight Software. To integrate all
Yeah,
the
that's a
Insight
big
Software
one.
products.
Yeah.
Yep, cool. Thank you. Cool. I guess we are out of questions today. That's a good thing. Cool. Thank you, Jens. Thank you, Gustav, for making the time. And thank you, everybody, for staying up. We will share the recording next week. And if you have any further questions, my contact details are on the screen. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for having us
Thanks
on.
for your time.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Cheers. Thank you.